Greetings, fellow adventurers. I'm Max with Peak D&D.
And I'm Ben. Welcome to the Peak.
We're here in the Rocky Mountains helping you elevate your game in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons and possibly life.
Now, in this episode of Peaked Interests, we're finishing our two-part series on the base classes and talking about casting sweet, sweet spells.
So let's roll some initiative and get to it.
In our last video, Max and I talked about the attack action classes. These included fighters, barbarians, paladins, monks, rangers, and rogues. And the analogy we used to help you think about these classes was a buffet full of entrees. It's up there if you want to check it out.
And if you're already full, I hope you save some room for dessert, because that's how Ben and I chose to tackle the spellcasting classes.
Only because of the way that magic works in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, we're approaching these 6 classes a little different.
Yeah, a buffet worked well for the attack classes. At least we thought, but now that we're talking wizards and warlocks and such, there's a pretty big distinction we wanted to address.
So you strip away all the details and idiosyncrasies, you get 2 major types of spellcasters. Those that have to prepare spells, and those that don't.
And so, working with that division, and in keeping with our food metaphor, your spellcaster dessert classes come in 2 major varieties: homemade and carryout.
Thinking about what kind of spellcaster you want to play is a lot like thinking about what kind of dessert you feel like eating. And I don't know about you, but for me, that comes down to the all-important question, how much work do you actually feel like doing?
There are, after all, more than one way to satisfy your sweet tooth. You can find a recipe, go to the store, buy ingredients, and make your heart's desire. Or you can grab something that someone else has made. It comes down to how much time and energy you feel like putting in.
And it's not like there's a right or wrong answer. If you don't like making your sweets from scratch, then don't. Just grab something from the grocery store, a bakery, or from those little devils that sometimes lurk outside the grocery store.
All right, grab your measuring cups, read your recipe from start to finish, and wash your hands, because we're going to start with those high-maintenance, labor-intensive, homemade dessert classes: Wizard, Cleric, and Druid.
What these 3 classes have in common is their need to prepare their spells. This means that you, as the player, finish a long rest, you need to choose which spells you're going to be able to use that day.
And depending on which of those 3 classes you are, either your intelligence or wisdom, along with your character level, will then determine how many different spells you get to prepare. Ben, what sort of dessert would you like to make first?
You know, Max, I think I could go for some fresh-baked, sweet-smelling, hot out of the oven cookies.
Wizard cookies. Chewy, delicious, and as customizable as they come.
Now, if it's dealing damage and variety that you are craving, then wizards are where it's at. They've got the largest spell list of any of the classes.
They are one of the more fragile classes, hit point-wise. Playing a wizard means you'll only roll a d6 for your hit points, plus your constitution bonus, of course.
They've also got the most limited selection of armor and weapons.
But what they lack in armor, weapons, and hit points, they more than make up for with a whole bunch of badass spells.
Now, intelligence is the ability score that makes the wizarding world go round. It's what determines how many spells you can prepare each day and how powerful they are.
And here's where wizards get a little weird. They're the only spellcasting class that has to learn their spells.
Every other class just gets them, but no, not wizards. These bookworm know-it-all scholars of Dungeons & Dragons pore over tomes and research the arcane, and then they write down their spells in a cute little tiny spell book.
Every time you gain a wizard level, you're allowed to choose 2 new spells to add to your cute little wizard spellbook, and they do have to be from a spell level that you are able to cast from.
In addition to gaining spells like this, wizards can also learn spells from 2 other sources: any scrolls they happen to find, or from another spellbook.
Gaining spells like this costs both time and money, but provided you have those 2 things and you encounter a written version of a spell that you're high enough level to cast and don't yet have, you can learn it.
Then, once you finish a long rest, you can make your shiny new spell one of the ones you prepare that day, if you so choose.
Arcane Recovery is another nifty thing that wizards get to do. Starting at first level once per day after a short rest, wizards are able to recover a bit of their magical mojo. Basically, these teacher pets have the ability to take their books and cram a little each day for some extra credit.
Then, at second level, wizards choose which tradition they want to specialize in, and this really determines what type of wizard cookie you're going to be baking.
Yeah, running through all of those choices is outside the scope of this video, but suffice it to say, just as it's important to read through recipes and decide which sounds the best to satisfy your cookie craving, read through all the different traditions.
It's the sheer amount of customization and ingredients that makes wizards like homemade cookies, not only based on the tradition you pick, but also the spells you choose to prepare each day.
Choice is something wizards share with their other two homemade dessert options. Clerics and druids also have to choose their spells each day, but unlike wizards, clerics and druids automatically get their entire list when they reach the appropriate level. What are we making next, Ben?
I'm in the mood for a little cleric cake.
I like it.
Now, more substantial and filling than wizard cookies, clerics are a heavier dessert. They roll a d8 for hit points and can use most armor, simple weapons, and shields.
But as cakes and cookies do share many ingredients in common, clerics, like wizards, prepare their spells after each long rest and have a character-defining choice to make early on.
Where wizards get to choose which type of magic they're going to study at second level, clerics need to decide which religion they're going to belong to at first level.
The domain you choose, the god you worship, then determines what kind of neat special powers you're going to get as you level up. It also affects your choice of spells.
Domain spells are like frosting. They're that little bit of extra sweetness spread on top of your moist, fluffy cleric cake.
I think what Ben is trying to say is a cleric's domain spells don't count against the number of spells they're allowed to prepare for the day. They're a bonus.
Like frosting.
Destroying skeletons, zombies, and other unholy abominations is something else clerics eventually get to do as they level up.
And lastly, Cleric Cake's spell casting ability is tied to their wisdom score. So if it's a cleric you want to make, putting a high score in wisdom is a good idea.
Wisdom also brings us to the last of our homemade, labor-intensive dessert classes, Druid.
Woof.
Not a fan?
No, I mean, druids are great. They're just a lot, you know, like Baked Alaska.
I don't even know what that is.
Sorry, I've been watching a lot of the Great British Bake Off this last year, and well, for those of you who are like Max and don't know what a Baked Alaska is, it's basically like a cake covered in ice cream, covered in meringue, baked like 3 times. It's really complicated.
Jesus.
Yeah, like druids.
Okay, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. See, not only do druids have to prepare spells like wizards and clerics, they also shape change.
Which is awesome, but also requires a lot of paperwork. You know, starting at second level, druids get wild shape, and this lets them change into different animals. There's a whole half page in the player's handbook that lays out all the details and what that means.
So anytime you take an animal form, your strength, dexterity, and constitution become that of your animal form. So does your hit points, hit dice, and mode of travel, meaning eventually you'll be able to fly if you become a bird, or swim if you become a fish.
Now, 3 things to keep in mind about wild shape, though. 1, you can't cast spells in beast mode until 15th level. 2, you can't easily communicate, though if you're clever, you can work around this. And 3, you can only turn into beasts that you've seen or encountered.
Hence all the paperwork that my best good buddy was referring to. Playing a druid means not only keeping track of all the beasts you encounter, but also keeping their stat blocks handy. Otherwise, the whole game gets derailed every time you turn into something and have to look up its info.
That's why druids are Baked Alaska, or another type of really complicated dessert. They just take a lot of time and preparation to get it just right.
Now they do get to roll a d8 for hit points, they can't wear armor made of metal, and have a limited selection of weapons they can use. Like their wizard cookie and cleric cake sisters and brothers, druids make a pivotal choice at second level. Depending on what you choose, you'll either gain some delicious domain icing of your own, or become better at beasting.
Now, if wizards are making your own cookies from scratch, sorcerers are like going to the hipster bakery down the street and buying cookies. You're trading the freedom and variety of making cookies yourself for convenience.
Sorcerers still boast a broad spell list full of offense, but instead of having a spell book and needing to learn and prepare spells each day, they just know their spells. It's in their blood.
Unlike wizards who study and learn magic relying on their intelligence, sorcerers are just born with it.
Maybe it's Maybelline.
In game terms, this means that charisma, their force of personality, is the attribute that fuels their magic.
And like their wizard cookie counterparts, sorcerers have the same limitations on weapons and armor, and roll the same d6 for hit points.
The two big features separating sorcerers from wizards are sorcerers have a limited number of spells that they just know, and sorcery points.
The information for both spells known and sorcery points are found in the player's handbook on the sorcerer table, and both increase as you gain levels.
Spells known is an easy mechanic. At first level, you know 2, so you get to pick any 2 first level spells from the sorcerer spell list. Then, as you gain levels, you gain additional spells. At every level, you've got the option to replace a spell that you already know with a different one.
So, instead of having to choose which spells you know after each long rest, like a wizard, you just know what you know until you gain a level. Then you can learn a new one and swap one out. Essentially, you're trading making a lot of little choices each day for making a big one each level.
And then you've got sorcery points. These you can use to do one of 2 things. You can either trade them for extra spell slots or augment your spells as you cast them. Either way, sorcerers regain both their sorcery points and their spell slots when they finish a long rest.
And they can also trade their spell slots for more sorcery points. It's like this. Each day, sorcerers wake up with a certain amount of magical energy, divided between slots and points, and you as the player get to figure out the best way to make use of it all.
And man, as much as I was hoping to save warlocks for last because their analogy is my favorite, and Jastian, I think now is the time.
Get it, Playboy.
Warlocks are similar to sorcerers, which are similar to wizards. They all get to cast spells, so they're still cookies, but they're weird, special cookies that are only available through certain means.
Indeed. Like sorcerers, warlocks use their charisma as their spellcasting attribute, have a limited amount of spells known, and can swap out spells for new ones when they gain a level. However, warlocks also have invocations.
Now, invocations are spell-like abilities that either make you or your spells a little better, and they let you simulate a spell's effect. And just like spells known, you can replace one of your old invocations with a new one when you gain a level.
There are 5 more things that set a warlock apart from their cookie comrades. They get a d8 for hit points, they regain their spell slots after a short rest, they can wear light armor, use simple weapons, and get a patron.
Yeah, at first level, you have to decide which uber-powerful being you have sworn allegiance to get your mystical powers from. And, depending on that choice, you unlock certain class features.
You heard that right. Warlocks sell their souls for power.
And because of that they have to go to someone else to get their magic, and they're only available through certain avenues, we decided that warlocks are like going to the store and buying Girl Scout cookies from the table outside.
Toolbox. Give me $4 for my cookies so I can be a woman of substance. Now, Ray Ray, do it.
And that brings us to our last store-bought dessert, the Bard.
Given their little bit of everything nature, bards are like going to the grocery store and grabbing whatever the hell you want for dessert. It's probably not going to be as delicious as the hipster bakery down the street, the diabolic scouts outside, or making it yourself, but hot damn, you can get a little bit of everything.
And we do mean everything. Bards are literal Jacks or Jills of all trades. Their hit dice, armor, and weapons are the same choices as a rogue. Their ability to cast spells is like a sorcerer's, but with a spell list that focuses mostly on healing and support, like a cleric.
A bard's spells are fired in the forges of charisma and feature the same mechanics of spells known and swapping as their store-bought kin. But in addition to all of this, they also get bardic inspiration.
Beginning at first level, bards can use their bonus action to give one of their friends an extra die to add to one of their rolls. It starts as a d6 and eventually works all the way up to a d12.
Bardic Inspiration is good for 10 minutes and can be used on any ability check, saving throw, or attack roll. And as the player, you get to roll your d20 first, see the result, and then decide if you want to add your inspiration die or not.
But you've got to decide before the DM tells you if you've succeeded or failed. And bards can't inspire themselves, only their party members.
And thus concludes our lengthy, though hopefully entertaining, dessert dissertation on the spellcasting classes. Thanks for sticking around and hanging out with us today.
Hopefully, we piqued your interests.
Gave you something to think about? Help you elevate your game?
Let us know in the comments below what types of cookies, cakes, or baked Alaskas are your favorite desserts and player characters.
And for more Peak D&D content, roll to hit that subscribe button and make sure to drop the wardings around the notification bell. That way, you won't get skipped and miss your turn.
And be sure to check back here for more Dungeons & Dragons content, like our next video on the rather touchy subject of race in Dungeons & Dragons. And cast Bigby's thumbs up and help the channel level up as we continue. Until then, keep on climbing, friends.
Catch you next time up here at the Peak.
It sound right, boy.